So recently you may have noticed that my background has changed a little bit, and that's because I bought a home during a pandemic. So in this video, I'm gonna share what it was like for us as first-time home buyers buying a home during a pandemic, all the way from actually looking at properties and going through the house hunting process all the way to moving in. It's kind of crazy, so stay tuned. My channel. At Frolic and Courage, I like to make videos on travel, food, and lifestyle, and today we're talking about buying a home during a pandemic. If you are looking to buy a home during a pandemic, specifically a new construction home, but this really applies to anyone who's going through the house hunting process as a first-time home buyer during the pandemic. So if you have any questions at any point, leave them in the comments down below and let's get into it. Before we bought our home, we did some things that really helped. We walked into this process with some money in the bank. We were thinking about having this big 3-year plan where we save up this massive down payment and then we put a whole bunch of money in a house, and then we go house hunting and it'd be this beautiful experience. But when we noticed that the interest rates were dropping to historic lows, we thought, okay, now's the time. We can get more for our money in this environment. We just decided to go for it. So after we checked our bank accounts and saw that we can actually put down a pretty decent down payment, we then went to a couple of different lenders. It was important for us to shop around for a lender because you never know who's gonna give you a good rate. We looked at our budget and said, okay, look, we are gonna set this limit right here. We're not going above this dollar amount, and hopefully the lenders will give us that amount. So we actually set up an appointment, and you'll see that appointments are king during a pandemic. And we got pre-approved for a mortgage. This was a clutch move. This was so important because during a pandemic, things are flying off the market. You don't know what's here today is gone tomorrow. And there's a lot of competition because the interest rates are low. And so having that pre-approval, not pre-qualification in hand. And the difference is that a pre-approval, they look at more of your financial information. They dig deeper. They want actual bank statements. They run your credit scores multiple times. They want to know that you are a secure buyer and you have a secure job history and that you can actually make the payments. And so a pre-approval letter, basically the banks asked us, well, how much do you want? And we knew how much we could afford, so we said we want X amount, as opposed to a pre-qualification letter where you just kind of give them some little piddly information about yourself, maybe how much you make, maybe your annual salary. If you're with someone, it's both you and your spouse's or your significant other's annual salary, and your job history, like the length of employment. And then they say, oh, okay, based off this, you can get this super crazy high amount. No, that was totally unrealistic. Pre-qualifications can be a little bit unrealistic, but actual pre-approvals, that's how much you're working with. So once we got our pre-approval letter, we knew exactly how much we could spend on a house. That was our maximum amount, and that's what we went shopping with. So those little appetizers there of having money in the bank and getting a pre-approval letter to know how much money you're working with were so important for us when buying a home during a pandemic as first-time home buyers, because we weren't messing around, and that let other realtors know, and that let our new construction home builder know that we were absolutely serious. We weren't messing around. We were serious buyers ready to go. So now comes the meat of the situation. The first part is what it was like house hunting during a pandemic. Woo! This was crazy. So we started this home buying process in March of last year. And in our area, things were starting to get a little crazy. Like, we had heard all these news reports of, like, you know, this thing that was coming. I linked up with a realtor that I knew, and it was critical for us to have somebody who knew what they were doing. We wanted somebody who had years of experience, a realtor license, knew the area well, knew the ins and outs of the home buying process, had relationships with builders, what was good, what was acceptable, and what was not. And she was not messing around, and we are so thankful to have Maria as a realtor. We actually prepared a list of things that we wanted in a home, from our needs all the way down to our wants, and we ranked our needs from what was a must-have versus what was a nice-to-have. And this really helped her to be able to narrow down properties quickly. During a pandemic, you may not be able to see every single house, and so she actually set up a virtual portal for us to look at, and she combed through all of the MLS listings for all the homes that met our criteria, and she put them in the portal. And before we stepped foot in a house, we went through the portal and looked at those homes virtually to see if it was something that we were interested in or not. as opposed to just physically going to a property, showing up, and then wandering around. After looking at the homes in the portal and narrowing down which ones we were interested in, our realtor then set up appointments. Again, appointments are key. Those appointments were socially distanced. We washed our hands, we wore little footies, we had hand sanitizers, we had masks. We had totally understood that it was a risk for the home buyers to have people in their homes. And it was a risk for us as first-time home buyers being in someone's home. So we both looked at existing properties as well as new construction before we decided to go with the new construction route. So for us, finding a realtor that was really savvy and knowledgeable and had relationships and knew how to navigate the real estate scene, as well as having that pre-approval letter and having money in the bank, keeping clean and safe during our house hunting, having a whole list of our needs versus our wants and prioritizing them, and being able to view homes virtually was so crazy, but also really nice to have, to know that everyone was safe and that we were respecting everyone's privacy as well as respecting everyone's health and safety. So we settled on a new construction home. It is a spec home where we get to pick out the layout and some of our fixtures, and they build it for us. Man, even though we had an appointment, people were still trying to come in and buy during the last few moments. This was now like the second week of March, and we had just gotten an order from our governor stating that everything was going to be shut down. And we went with our realtor house hunting on the weekend before, and this was our second week of looking at properties, and we were like, wow, okay, so things are shutting down pretty quickly. We need to move fast. And people were kind of coming in and out, you know, kind of waiting for our appointment so then they can get their home. It was a madhouse. She was our advocate straight up from the beginning, and I am so, so thankful for her. So now it was time to actually secure a loan for the property. So we had gotten a pre-approval letter. Now we actually had to contact the bank and say, okay, this is the property we want to buy. Our new home construction rep wrote up the purchase agreement, and we forwarded that to our lender. And just because there's a pandemic doesn't mean you guys can't get any deals out there, okay? We get about $25,000 off our home. And y'all, there's a lot actually that goes into financing. So I'm going to dedicate a whole video next week to paying for a new construction home. We're going to talk about when is the down payment due, what are the closing costs, what are the hidden costs that are in between that nobody ever tells you about. Like, nobody ever breaks down closing costs for you. Well, I'm going to do that in my next video, so don't forget to click that subscribe button and join the Frolic and Courage family, because I'm going to spill all that tea. But once our lender got our paperwork, that's when the underwriting process began, and they took a deep dive into our finances. For us, this process was 100% online. We ended up using our builder's lender because we got $25,000 off, like no brainer, and they had the best deals and the best terms for us. Nothing was faxed, nothing was phoned in. It all had to be through a secure portal. I'm that person who doesn't like to have that little bubble that has like one email message showing on like my app. I need to have a cleared inbox, and so I was on my email game. And during a pandemic, this was clutch because the lenders would message us for different documents or for additional documents or for justification, and we needed to respond very quickly so that we can get the loan process moving, because interest rates change every single day, every single hour. We wanted to secure the best interest rate for our home, so we needed to provide those documents in a timely manner. We started the mortgage process, the underwriting process. Underwriting is essentially when you have someone from the bank's representatives take a deep history of your finances for the past 3 months, and they comb through every single transaction. And again, in the video I'll make next week, I'll talk more about that in depth. But the underwriter looked at our documents and said, okay, this is great. We actually approve the pre-approval letter. We believe that this couple can securely pay for this, and so we will grant them the official mortgage. The underwriters are the ones that make the calls, y'all. And so having that email communication back and forth was critical. And then with that, there was a ton of online signatures. There were no wet signatures, meaning with pen and paper. We didn't have to show up at anyone's office. We didn't have to do any of that. We just had to sign everything electronically. As long as you have an internet connection, you can handle business. Our builder told us it would take about 6 months to build a home. So when we signed the paperwork about mid to late March, we knew that our home was going to be built about late September, early October. And so that leads us to tracking the progress of our home during a pandemic. With new construction homes, specifically with spec homes, you have many appointments you have to keep. Again, there's the message, appointments are key. We had to go to a pre-drywall meeting, which is when the home is completely just on its bones and all you see is wood and wires. Then we had a final walkthrough. If we needed any inspections in the meantime, we had to secure those. We had to provide a statement basically stating that nobody had any symptoms, nobody had any fevers or coughs or chills or anything like that prior to our appointment. And as our home was being built, we kind of went in and peeked in and took some footage. I will pop in that footage as I'm talking right now, but we also had to keep communication open with our builder. Instead of just popping up the builder's office whenever we wanted to, trying to check the status of our home, we had to call in advance and, as you guessed it, set an appointment, or we would just drive by the property ourselves to kind of visually check the progress. And boy, it went up. Construction is a necessity, and so construction does not stop during a pandemic. The construction workers are essential employees. They worked very hard on our home, and so we didn't really have any delays with the construction process. So then when it came time to closing, our closing process went pretty smooth as well. Emails. I had to check my email so much the last about 2 weeks before we closed, because then our closing company sent us a new portal and new documents to review. So it was more documents, and they needed stuff like ASAP. So they'd be like, okay, send us this by the end of the day. Send us this in the next couple of hours. And so I would be on my email kind of frantically looking at papers and documents and going, okay, here's this, here's this. It was almost like a game of tennis where they would hit the ball and then I'd hit the ball back and I'd pass the ball back, and then they would go and then I would pass the ball back, and it was a back and forth process, kind of a whirlwind really. We had to transfer over all of the funds via wire transfer. We had to go to the bank, and we had to have an appointment for the bank. And the crazy thing about going to the banks, y'all, during the pandemic as a first-time home buyer, some banks will let you wire transfer your final costs over the phone, but we decided to go kind of in person because we don't want to be giving our, information out like that. They asked us to wait in our cars, and they put our name on a little checklist, and they said, hey, write your number down. We will call you and tell you when it's okay for you to come inside this branch. And we were totally cool with that. We're like, hey, however we can do this as safely as possible, let's do it. So that was something that during the pandemic was a little kind of weird. You're not used to really waiting in a car for an appointment, but hey, we transferred the money over for the closing. This was the only part of the process where we actually needed a cold hard signature, was during the closing process. We set an appointment, as you guys know, and when we got there was a plastic partition between us and the notary. And we were the only people allowed in that room. Not our realtor, who she was sitting outside, not the rest of the lawyers or anyone else like that. They were outside in their offices. It was just us and the notary public and that little partition in between us. They had a little hole in it, and so the documents that needed to be signed with a signature, she would slip it through a little hole, and then we would take it, she would explain it to us, and we would sign, and we would slip it back. Prior to that appointment, we had already signed our closing documents electronically online, but again, certain things legally need to be signed in a certain color ink, and we had to be there in person to do that. The whole process took maybe about 45 minutes or so. It was really quick. Our notary was just like stamping the documents, getting them over to us, explaining what we needed to do, and it was really a really fast process. After 6 months of virtually and somewhat physically touring homes and going through all of the walkthroughs, all of the emails with the builder, the lender, the underwriters, the closing company, the settlement companies, after all this whirlwind of 6 months, us going in doing drive-bys on our home, it was finally time to get our keys. And that is also why we had to show up in person, because we needed to physically take possession of our keys. Our closing company said that some companies actually mail the keys to their people, but thankfully we didn't have to do that. And then it was time to move in, and the fun wasn't over yet. So moving into a new construction home during a pandemic, we had to secure an appointment months in advance. As soon as I got a notice of when our anticipated closing date was, I started emailing companies for quotes ASAP. One of the things I wasn't really aware of was how booked moving companies were. I've moved to a couple of different apartments in a couple of different states, so I'm pretty familiar with the moving process. And typically, if you ask for a mover, they will want to come physically to your place and evaluate what you have and then provide you with a quote. They need to know a lot of really detailed information, and they're used to coming and doing that evaluation and providing a quote for you on the spot. But during a pandemic, that is not something that some movers are doing, especially in this area. So the form I filled out online was pretty lengthy. So I just estimated, hey, given our stuff and giving a standard box size, I think we might have like 30 or 40 boxes with these major pieces of furniture. I provided them with that information, and then they gave me a quote based on that. There were certain policies that we had to acknowledge that we knew of and would abide by before we even booked the moving company. One of them was that we had to certify that we had no symptoms and that we had not been in contact with anyone who had symptoms of the illness. We also had to provide our movers with soap, paper towels, and a place for them to wash their hands before, during, and after the move. We also had to pay a fee for moving during the pandemic. That's a fee that is not assessed in normal times. And during the move, we also had to stay out of the way, of course. No one wants to stay in the way anyways, but we really had to stay out of the way. And we had to lift all of the windows up and open the windows so that there was air flowing through our apartment. We had all of our boxes and we had everything stacked up neatly. I had labeled each of the boxes with what room they were going in and what floors. The company let us know in advance how many movers there would be, what their names would be, and they reminded us of those policies. Tipping was optional, and we decided to tip like crazy and bless these guys because they were amazing and they were coming out during a pandemic and they were so grateful, and we were even more grateful to have them. But during the move, they all had masks, they all had gloves, and we kept our distance. The only thing that we actually had to do during the move was stand to the side, and if they had a question, they would ask us. As they were moving to the new place, we were definitely cleaning the heck out of our new construction home. It was already spotless beforehand, but we just wanted to make sure, so we had whatever sanitizing wipes we could find at the moment because those wipes were completely sold out. Most of the cleaning products were sold out. All we had was like some bleach, which will get the job done, and some paper towels that we could scrounge up because those were scarce. And so that really was our experience buying a home during a pandemic. It was a whirlwind. Like, you never would have thought that 6 months would go by that fast. Under normal times, there's a lot of face-to-face interaction. You can kind of see things and touch things for yourself, but yeah, none of that. It's a lot of emails, it's a lot of phone calls, it's a lot of appointments. Oh, the appointments, the glory of appointments. We did things to make the process a lot easier, like getting pre-approved, having money in the bank, following all the rules, not complaining, and just being grateful, because had it been up to us, we would have been in a home after 3 years, not after 6 months. So we just thank God that we were able to do this. There are people who are not as fortunate, and I just pray for them, and I pray that their situation improves and gets better. And we are just so thankful to God that we were able to get this new home. It's nothing but God, y'all. I give credit where credit's due. It's nothing but God. So that's what it's like buying a new construction home during a pandemic. It was a whirlwind process. Lots of social distancing, lots of email, a lot going on. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. And don't forget to click the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, because next week I am dropping all the knowledge, spilling all the tea about paying for a new construction home. So if you're wondering, what is the down payment like? When do I pay the down payment? When do I pay my closing costs? How much are they? I am going to drop that for you all next week. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.